Hi, little loves. Welcome back to Bedtime with Mama. Last time we were together reading the Double Trouble Society, we finished chapter 4, where the girls, Ivy and Maggie, saw the lady next door, who they think is a witch, make cupcakes with her bare hands, no oven, and they think they saw her put a special ingredient into the batter. Do you remember what that was? Poison. And then the girls heard their doorbell ring, so they're a little bit freaked out now. So tonight we're going to read chapter 5, which is Poison. Maggie raced across the messy floor of her room, trending on the piece of Lego as she went. Ouch! She flung open her bedroom door so hard it slammed against the wall, making the picture frames rattle. Instead of taking the stairs, she hopped onto the banister and slid all the way down, something her dad was forever telling her not to do. She landed with a crash and shouted, "Dad, don't!" "Why, hello, Maggie," a soft voice replied. Max had already opened the door, and the woman from next door was standing in the open doorway of the house, holding the plate of perfectly baked and beautifully iced cupcakes. Amy's dark purple lips stretched into a pleasant smile as she looked at Maggie, showing her impossibly straight and dazzlingly white teeth. Her eyes were dark and didn't look purple up close, but Ivy figured she must be able to hide the way they glowed when she needed to. Her nose turned up at the end into a point, and her hair was so unbelievably white blonde it almost hurt Ivy's eyes to look at it. "How do you know who I am?" Maggie cried. "Maggie!" Max was aghast. "I'm sorry, Amy. I'm not sure what's got into her. Maggie, you've known Amy ever since you were a baby. Amy even used to babysit you when I had to work late. Now, say you're sorry for being so rude." "I'm not saying sorry to a witch," Maggie scoffed. A what?" Max laughed in a straight, high-pitched sort of way. "What on earth do you mean?" "I don't know this woman," Maggie gestured wildly at Amy, who remained calm and composed while Maggie's voice got louder and louder. "You're a total stranger," she said directly to her, "and we know you've put a spell on everyone, but it hasn't worked on us. We know exactly what you're up to." "Maggie," Ivy said quietly from her hiding spot halfway up the stairs. Maggie was right, of course, but it had occurred to Ivy that maybe it wasn't the best idea to reveal everything they knew to someone who might be able to turn them into slow worms with a simple click of her fingers. However, Amy didn't seem angry or disturbed by Maggie's outburst. She simply kept smiling sweetly. "I'm not a stranger, Maggie," she said with a voice as soft and delicate as spider silk. "I've been here all along. Why don't you have a cupcake and take a moment to calm down? Both of you, in fact." Amy lifted her gaze to Ivy, still crouched on the stairs. Max was looking more and more furious by the minute. "I'm not having one of your evil cupcakes," Maggie said, standing up, straightening her back, and planting her feet firmly on the ground, fists clenched at her side. She looked Amy right in the eye and said, "I know you've poisoned them." "Maggie!" Max almost toppled over with shock at his daughter's insolence. "What an awful thing to say when Amy has been so kind to you and Ivy. She's made cupcakes specifically for you both, and it's the least you could do to be grateful. I gather you've been doing a lot of snooping." "We haven't been snooping," Ivy said feebly from the safety of the stairs. Not my words, Ivy," Amy said. "I simply mentioned to Max that you've both been showing a lot of interest in me and my house and my cat today. When you don't usually pay me much attention," she smiled. "I see you upstairs, peering at me through the windows." She mimed holding a pair of binoculars to her eyes. "So I thought some cupcakes might be a nice neighborly offering. They're chocolate and caramel, your favorites." Maggie glanced behind her at Ivy, whose eyes were wide. It was true. Maggie loved chocolate and Ivy loved caramel. "How do you know what our favorite flavors are?" Ivy asked. I've always known, Amy laughed. It sounded like shards of glass clinking together. When you were little, Maggie, you always had chocolate around your face. And Ivy, I've always used to keep caramel toffees in my pocket in case I saw you. You could follow the trail of empty wrappers to your front door. None of that is true. We don't know you, whoever you are, Maggie said, her hands on her hips. And we don't want to know you. Ivy finally joined Maggie in the hallway, but stood a little bit behind her. Girls, I don't know why you're acting this way, but it's not fair to Amy. When she's been so kind, gosh, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm so sorry, Amy. I promise you we will have a long discussion about this later. Max fixed both girls with a hard stare that made them feel slightly ashamed. It's okay, Max. Please don't worry. But I'd still like to leave the cupcakes here in case you two change your mind. Amy presented the plate to Max on her fingertips. Best friends have a way of communicating without using words. It only takes a meaningful look or a nudge or a squeeze of the hand or arm to know exactly what the other is trying to say. Maggie and Ivy gave each other such a look at that very moment. They both began to raise their hands, but Ramshackle beat them to it. The cat leapt up from the doorstep on Amy's shoulders and pounced on the plate of cakes. Amy couldn't keep hold of the plate, and it plummeted to the floor, shattering to pieces. The cupcakes flew through the air, and most landed icing side down, chocolate crumbs and buttercream smushing into the hallway carpet. Ramshackle, that darn cat! Amy said through gritted teeth, wiping her icing-covered fingers on her coat. Ivy noticed that Amy wasn't licking her fingers clean, like she would have done if she had delicious sticky icing all over them. More proof that they were poisoned. Ramshackle didn't seem to be eating the mess on the floor either. Instead, it lifted one of its hind legs, looked a furry paw through its collar, and tried to tug it loose. Stop that, Ramshackle, Amy said, gently shooing the cat out of the house. Away! You've had your cupcakes for the evening. You fed your cat cupcakes? Max said from where he now knelt on the floor, using bits of broken plate to try and scoop up the cake crumbs off the carpet. Amy knelt too to help him. Oh, goodness, don't laugh, Max, but yes, whenever I make cupcakes for myself, or friends, Amy glanced up at Ivy and Maggie. I always feel bad that Ramshackle can't have any, so I make cat-friendly cupcakes too, made with essence of poison. Amy kissed the tips of her fingers like a chef. Poison? Amy asked, scrunching up her nose, trying to make sense of the word she'd never heard before. It's French, Ivy said, the color draining out of her face. Poison is French for fish. I make fish cupcakes for Ramshackle. Ivy and Maggie gave each other another significant look. Was it possible they'd mistaken the word poison for poison? Don't worry about this mess, Amy. These two will clear it up, won't you? Max folded his arms over his chest. Yes, Dad, Maggie mumbled, not quite able to meet her father's eyes. Of course, Max, Ivy said, already bending down carefully to collect broken bits of china. And we'll replace the plate, Max offered. Oh, don't worry about it. That was an old one I was going to get rid of anyways. If anything, Ramshackle did me a favor. Amy glanced at Ivy and Maggie, and they both noticed her give a small and brief sigh. We know you have magic, Maggie said defiantly, despite her father's reprimands. There's a little bit of magic in all of us, Amy said, shrugging. Then she flashed Max one of her perfect smiles and was gone. Frankenstein bounded towards them from the kitchen, sensing the food that had been dropped and heading to hoover it up, not with the vacuum cleaner, but with his tongue. No, Frankenstein, stop it, Maggie said, desperately tugging at the dog's collar. They're not safe to eat. Enough of this instant, Maggie, Max said, taking the dog, already licking icing off the end of his nose, from her. Now, I don't know what sort of game you two have been playing, but it ends this instant. Amy is a kind woman, and you were both very rude to her just now. The two of you are going to think about what you've done this evening, and tomorrow before school, I'll be marching over there with you to apologize." "But Dad," Maggie began, but Max held up his hand. "I don't want to hear any more about this. I'm disappointed in both of you. I thought you had more manners than that." Max collected the broken bits of china from Ivy and went into the kitchen, shaking his head, with Frankenstein lopping behind him. Once Ivy and Maggie had hoovered up the last of the crumbs and scraped the carpet clean, they retreated to Maggie's untidy den. "Did we really mistake a bottle of fish paste for poison?" Maggie said quietly, her eyes sad and dull from disappointing her father. She and her dad were as much a team as she and Ivy were. Being in his bad book was always upset her. "Possibly," Ivy grimaced. "But we're not totally wrong about her, Maggie. Even if she wasn't trying to poison us, we still watched her do magic. Her hands glowed purple. That's a sign of someone who can cause a lot of trouble if they wanted to." "That's true." Maggie's eyes lit up once more. "So you really think she's a witch?" "It looks like it," Ivy admitted. "But which kind of witch? A good one or a bad one?" Maggie asked. "There are good witches," said Ivy. "Of course there are. Glinda the Good Witch of the South from The Wizard of Oz. She was a friend to Dorothy and the Munchkins. Hermione Granger, Sabrina Spellman, they're good witches," Maggie said. "So this one could be good too," Ivy said, although she wasn't entirely sure she believed it herself. "Or," Maggie said, "she's the Crowwood Witch, back to claim the 13th child, as the prophecy states." Ivy nodded. "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. First things first, we need to write down a proper list of what we already know." She reached into her school bag and pulled out her pink spiral-bound notebook. She opened it to the first clean page, which was quite far back in the book, as Ivy liked to write down anything and everything that she thought might be useful for later. She began to list the facts that had already been talked about in the cafe. First, fact 1. Hokum House was a wreck until Amy showed up. Fact 2. We have never seen Amy before in our entire lives, and she certainly never lived next door. Fact 3. Neither of us knew she was called Amy. Fact 4. The note in the library described Hokum House as being abandoned for 300 years, and then the note vanished. Fact 5. Amy has shown up exactly 300 years after the Crowwood Witch vanished. Okay, fact number 6. Amy can do magic, Ivy said, scrolling in her notebook as she spoke. Fact number 7. She's put a spell on people in our village to make them think she's been living here for ages, Maggie added. Wait. Ivy looked up from her notebook, her eyes darting to and fro. Maggie could tell she was having an idea. "Maggie, we need to get to school early tomorrow." "Early? Because Dad wants us to apologize to Amy?" Maggie said, already yawning at the thought of having to get up for school at all, yet alone earlier than usual. "Oh, yes. I forgot about that. Extra early, then. Trust me," Ivy said. "We've got some fact collecting to do." That is the end of Chapter 5. Come back tomorrow night and we'll read on to Chapter 6 and see what Maggie and Ivy are going to go to the school early for tomorrow. Can't wait to see you tomorrow for another chapter. Sweetest of dreams.